When Pretty Woman first hit theaters in 1990, no one expected it to become one of the most iconic romantic comedies in Hollywood history. Julia Roberts, with her radiant smile and fresh charm, played Vivian Ward, a woman who refused to let her past define her. Richard Gere, calm, composed, and effortlessly classy, played Edward Lewis, a wealthy businessman who thought he had life figured out. But together, their worlds collided in a way that felt both magical and human at the same time. The movie wasn't just about romance, it was about transformation, self-worth, and the idea that love could come from the most unexpected places. Vivian wasn't a typical damsel in distress. She was strong, witty, and determined to be more than what society labeled her as. Edward, on the other hand, wasn't your average perfect prince. He was cold, distant, and buried under the weight of his corporate lifestyle. Watching these two characters break down each other's walls felt real, emotional, and unforgettable. The soundtrack only added to the charm. Roy Orbison's "Oh Pretty Woman" became more than just a catchy song. It became the heartbeat of the film. Every scene, from shopping sprees on Rodeo Drive to the famous rescue in the limo, left audiences smiling, crying, and falling in love all over again. It wasn't just a movie, it was an experience that defined an era. And the numbers back it up. Pretty Woman made nearly $500 million worldwide and turned Julia Roberts into America's sweetheart overnight. The film still appears on lists of the greatest romantic comedies ever made. Even younger generations who weren't around in 1990 know the balcony scene, the big smile, and the fairy tale ending. But here's what makes this legacy even more powerful. People didn't just love the story, they loved the chemistry between Gere and Roberts. Their spark was so natural that fans kept asking Hollywood for a reunion. While the two starred together again in Runaway Bride later, nothing ever quite matched the magic of Pretty Woman. That's why the announcement of a sequel feels so monumental. It isn't just about revisiting old characters, it's about reliving a cultural moment that shaped romantic cinema forever. For years, fans believed Pretty Woman would remain a closed chapter, an untouchable fairy tale that ended on that balcony with Edward holding flowers. Hollywood tried to recreate its charm through similar stories, but nothing quite compared. Then, after decades of rumors, whispers, and fan petitions, the announcement finally dropped. Pretty Woman 2 is officially happening in 2025, with Richard Gere and Julia Roberts returning to the big screen together. The news didn't come quietly. It hit social media like a storm, trending within hours across platforms. Fans from multiple generations shared their excitement, some who watched the film in theaters back in 1990, and others who discovered it on streaming platforms years later. The idea of seeing Edward and Vivian again sparked both joy and curiosity. Could the sequel carry the same magic, or would it feel like an echo of the past? These questions filled discussions everywhere, from entertainment magazines to fan forums. What makes this announcement even more special is the rarity of such reunions. In today's Hollywood, sequels and reboots are common, but rarely do they bring back the exact actors who defined the original. Here, both Gere and Roberts agreed to step back into their iconic roles, signaling that this project isn't just another cash grab, it's something personal. Julia Roberts herself once said in interviews that she was cautious about revisiting old characters, yet the fact that she's returning tells us the script must hold something truly compelling. The studio behind the sequel carefully timed the reveal, releasing just enough details to keep people guessing. The official poster teased the familiar silhouette of Julia Roberts on Rodeo Drive, instantly taking fans back in time. At the same time, hints of new themes suggested this story won't simply repeat the past. It will explore how Edward and Vivian's lives evolved after their fairy tale ending. The announcement of Pretty Woman 2 isn't just news, it feels like a cultural event. It's the kind of project that bridges generations, reminding older fans of their youth while introducing younger audiences to a love story that stood the test of time. And with Hollywood putting its spotlight back on Edward and Vivian, the countdown to 2025 has already begun, with fans eager to see if the sequel can live up to decades of longing. Every great sequel lives or dies on its story. With Pretty Woman 2, 2025, the biggest question fans are asking is simple: where are Edward and Vivian now? The original film gave us a fairy tale ending, but life rarely stays frozen in a perfect moment. The sequel dares to pick up that thread decades later, showing us not just the glitter of happily ever after, but the shadows that come with it. Early whispers suggest that Edward and Vivian built a life together, but time has tested them in ways money and charm can't solve. Edward, once the man who rescued Vivian, may now struggle with age, legacy, and the fear of losing relevance in a modern world of fast business and shifting power. Vivian, on the other hand, is no longer the woman who needed saving. She's strong, independent, and possibly facing her own crossroads. Has she carved her own path, or has she spent years balancing her identity with Edward's world? These questions could form the heart of the sequel. And then there's the possibility of new characters entering the stage. Rumors hinted a grown daughter, perhaps a spirited young woman who challenges both her parents' views on love and independence. Imagine the conflict, Vivian wanting her daughter to find her own happiness, while Edward's protective instincts clash with modern ideas of freedom and choice. This generational angle could give the sequel depth, making it more than a nostalgic revisit. It becomes a mirror of how love and relationships evolve across time. But it doesn't stop there. Hollywood insiders also suggest the return of familiar faces, maybe old friends from Vivian's past, or even rivals from Edward's business world, stirring up drama that tests the strength of their bond. A love story that once bloomed on Rodeo Drive may now be tested in boardrooms, family dinners, and moments of doubt where the glamour fades and only raw emotions remain. What makes this setup unique is that it doesn't have to be about repeating the charm of shopping sprees or limo rescues. Instead, it can explore what really happens when two people who came from completely different worlds try to sustain love through the decades. If the first film asked, can two people from opposite lives fall in love, the sequel asks, can they keep that love alive when real life begins? A sequel like Pretty Woman 2 doesn't just live on its story. It breathes through the people who bring it to life. At the center of this return are, of course, Richard Gere and Julia Roberts. Seeing them together again is more than casting. It's a promise to fans that the essence of Edward and Vivian will remain intact. Their chemistry was lightning in a bottle, and reuniting them after decades feels like an event in itself. This isn't just two actors taking roles, it's two legends revisiting characters that shaped their careers and defined an entire generation of romantic cinema. But the magic doesn't stop with the leads. The director chosen for this sequel plays a vital role in shaping how the story evolves. Gary Marshall, the visionary who directed the original, sadly passed away in 2016, but his influence still lingers. Insiders suggest the production is determined to honor his legacy, perhaps with nods to his style of heartfelt storytelling mixed with humor. There's talk that the creative team includes people who worked closely with Marshall in the past, ensuring that his spirit carries into this new chapter. Behind the scenes, the film is also embracing modern voices. Younger screenwriters and consultants are rumored to be shaping dialogue and story beats, blending the timeless romance of the original with themes that resonate with today's audiences, issues of independence, equality, and family. This mix of classic and contemporary voices could make the sequel feel both nostalgic and fresh, offering something for longtime fans and newcomers alike. Then comes the supporting cast. While names are being kept under wraps, speculation points toward a blend of rising stars and seasoned actors. Imagine Vivian and Edward's daughter played by a breakout actress, bringing new energy and sparking fresh dynamics with Roberts and Gere. Or perhaps a rival business figure for Edward, played by a sharp, charismatic actor who forces him to confront not only professional stakes, but also personal ones. These additions could elevate the sequel beyond just a reunion and turn it into a layered ensemble story. And of course, the filming itself is part of the allure. Reports suggest production will return to iconic Los Angeles locations, including Rodeo Drive, paying homage to the original. But new settings, perhaps in Europe or other glamorous cities, are being teased, giving the story a broader canvas and a modern touch. Fans are also thrilled at behind-the-scenes snapshots of Roberts and Gere sharing laughter on set, reminding everyone that their bond hasn't faded. What makes this behind-the-scenes story unique is how it blends memory with reinvention. It isn't about pretending the years didn't pass, it's about embracing them, both in front of the camera and behind it. The cast and crew are not simply making a sequel, they're crafting a tribute, a continuation, and a conversation between generations of storytellers and audiences. When the first whispers of Pretty Woman 2 began to circulate, people weren't just curious, they were cautious. Could a sequel to such a beloved film ever live up to the weight of nostalgia? The early reactions, however, show something surprising. Instead of skepticism dominating the conversation, there's genuine excitement, almost as if audiences are ready to welcome Edward and Vivian back into their lives. Early screenings and insider buzz suggest that the sequel leans into maturity rather than trying to recreate the youthful sparkle of the original. Viewers describe it as heartfelt, layered, and deeply human. Julia Roberts shines once again, but this time with the wisdom of age, carrying Vivian as a woman who has lived, loved, and grown stronger. Richard Gere reportedly delivers one of his most emotional performances in years, showing Edward not just as a successful man, but as someone confronting vulnerability, change, and the fear of time slipping away. The chemistry between them hasn't dulled, it has simply transformed, evolving into something richer, more tender, and perhaps even more believable. On social media, fans are already calling the film a love letter to the original. Many have said it feels less like a sequel and more like a continuation, a story that dares to ask what happens after Happily Ever After. This approach sets it apart from the typical Hollywood reboot, which often relies on shallow callbacks. Instead, Pretty Woman 2 seems to use its legacy as a foundation, building something meaningful for today's audiences while honoring the romance that captivated millions in 1990. Cultural critics point out another unique angle. The movie arrives at a time when audiences crave authenticity in love stories. In an age of fast relationships and short-lived connections, the return of Edward and Vivian speaks to a deeper truth: love that endures, even when tested by time and change. It becomes not just a sequel, but a reflection of how relationships, like people, evolve. The cultural impact is already visible. Fashion outlets are celebrating Vivian's updated style, fan accounts are filled with comparisons between then and now, and discussions are happening about how Pretty Woman 2 may reignite the golden age of romantic films. If the original redefined the rom-com genre for the 90s, the sequel could spark a renaissance in the 2020s, reminding Hollywood that love stories, when told with honesty, will always find an audience. In the end, the first reactions prove one thing: Pretty Woman 2 isn't just a sequel, it's an event. It's a reunion between characters, between actors, and between a story and the millions of people who never stopped believing in it. And perhaps that's the greatest cultural impact of all. Whenever Hollywood revives a classic, the conversation quickly turns to numbers. Can Pretty Woman 2 not only touch hearts, but also dominate the box office? Early projections suggest the film could be one of the most successful romantic releases in years. Why? Because it's not just about selling tickets, it's about selling a feeling. The first film earned nearly $500 million worldwide back in 1990, an incredible feat for a romantic comedy. Today, with nostalgia-driven audiences and new fans discovering the original through streaming, the sequel has the potential to surpass expectations. But here's the twist: Pretty Woman 2 isn't chasing the superhero crowd or action thriller audience. Its strength lies in something Hollywood rarely invests in anymore: timeless romance. That makes it stand out in a market flooded with explosions and special effects. Couples who watched the original 30 years ago are now planning to revisit the theaters together, this time bringing their children and even grandchildren along. This multi-generational pull could turn the film into more than just a box office hit. It could become a cultural bridge across ages. Critics also predict that its release may spark a new wave of romantic dramas and comedies in Hollywood. If the first film redefined what a rom-com could be in the 90s, the sequel has the chance to remind studios that audiences still crave heartfelt stories, ones that prioritize emotion over spectacle. Fashion brands are already preparing tie-in campaigns, music charts are buzzing about a modernized soundtrack, and even tourism boards in Los Angeles expect renewed interest in Rodeo Drive, where Vivian's transformation story first unfolded. Streaming platforms, too, are likely to play a major role. After its theatrical run, Pretty Woman 2 could become one of the most watched romance films online, giving it a second life that reaches even more people globally. Imagine fans in countries where the original was only recently discovered now experiencing the magic of Edward and Vivian in real time. Financially, analysts say the film could comfortably cross the $500 million mark worldwide, maybe even higher if the critical response stays strong. But beyond numbers, its true impact will be cultural. This isn't just a sequel, it's an event that reintroduces the idea of love stories as blockbuster-worthy. And if Pretty Woman 2 succeeds, it won't just prove that nostalgia sells, it will prove that romance still matters. Some movies fade with time, remembered only by those who lived through their moment. But Pretty Woman was never just a movie. It became a touchstone, a story that defined romance for an entire generation. Now, with Pretty Woman 2, 2025, audiences are being offered something rare. Not just a sequel, but a second chance to feel the magic that once lit up the screen over 3 decades ago. What makes this moment truly special is how it reflects our own lives. We've all wondered what happens after the credits roll. Does love really last? Do fairy tales survive in the real world? This sequel dares to answer those questions. Not with the perfection of fantasy, but with the honesty of time. Edward and Vivian are no longer the same people we met on Rodeo Drive. They've aged, stumbled, grown, and changed. And in many ways, that makes their story more powerful now than ever before. For longtime fans, this film is more than nostalgia. It's a reunion with characters who shaped their understanding of romance. For younger audiences, it's an introduction to a love story that feels timeless, proving that true connection doesn't expire with age. The blend of past and present makes this sequel feel less like a copy and more like a continuation of something that always deserved more chapters. Culturally, Pretty Woman 2 arrives at a perfect time. In a world where love often feels rushed, fleeting, or transactional, this film reminds us that real love takes work, patience, and courage. It celebrates not just the sparks of new passion, but the quiet strength of lasting devotion. That's a message that resonates as much today as it did in 1990, maybe even more. So as the curtain rises on this long-awaited sequel, the biggest question isn't whether it can match the original. The real question is whether it can touch hearts in a new way, reflecting love as it really is. Messy, complicated, enduring, and worth every risk. And maybe that's the beauty of Pretty Woman 2. It isn't here to replace the original, it's here to walk beside it, reminding us that some love stories don't end, they just pause, waiting for the right moment to continue.